Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Johnson Yuan, and I'm International Urgent Appeal Coordinator at Clean Clothes Campaign. It's my honor to welcome you to this sessions, a global solvents guarantee fund as the solution to the fashion industry cut and run business model. This session was curated under the backdrops of the wake of wage threat cases and sudden factory closure during the pandemic, and also the growing risk from trade war and climate impact. So campaigners and civil society then has this ideas of global solvents fund to support and provide social security to the workers. So the questions before us is, can a pooled fund financed by global brands and other stakeholders provide effective protections for garment workers who face solvents threat, mass disruption to the global supply chain, and have no social security net at all? So we're going to explore this question. We had originally envisioned that this would be a Oxford style debate. Welcome. And with both sides represented, we're trying to invite brands and multilateral bodies such as the ILO to join us. Unfortunately, that they declined for various reasons. So we hope some of them are in the audience today and join the discussions later. So instead, we're gonna flip the format a little bit of this session. We'll make it as a stress test to the proposal with 4 excellent experts in here. Kapona Atta, Executive Directors of Bangladesh Center for Workers' Solidarity, and Iniket Sudan Rush, International Coordinator at the Clean Clothes Campaign, who will present the case for the fund. Drawing from workers' experience and real-time cases in Thailand, Bangladesh, and many places, they were trying to argue for the proposal. And we have Jason Ju, Executive Directors of Cornell Global Labor Institute, who published an independent study on solvents breakdown in the COVID crisis and an analysis of an alternative models. We have David Hatfield, Senior Expert for Global Values Chains and Fashions at Risk NGO Public Eye, who does a lot of independent research in the garment industry, who is an expert on wage. And the two of them, during their decades-long of experience, will pose the strongest counter-arguments against the propositions. When we are coming to the UN building, we share a ride with David and Jason. And I could tell you these two people can be very critical, and it makes me swallow my words. So you can expect them, they will go strong today. Okay? So after several rounds of stress testing of the proposal, we will open up the floor for questions and answers so you can also participate. And we will have a simple temperature check among the participants through Mentimeter, and then ending with closing remark. So without further ado, let's begin. May I invite Iniket and Kapona?
Thank you so much, Jason, and hello, everyone. So when we talk about pay your workers, this proposal, severance grantee fund, the first question comes that why? Why we had to. So during COVID, when whole world was shut down, we were like closing our doors and windows not to get the infected, right? It was the factory worker who had to be in the factory and keep working by name of like keep alive the country economy. It seems that they will be not having COVID or they will be not getting infected, but that wasn't the case. But despite all those, they had to. But what happened? Within a few weeks, these workers started getting fired from their factory without getting any severances or even back wages. That happened with many workers around the world, and including my country. And I'm from Bangladesh. So it was few hundred thousands of workers lost their jobs from the day 7 when they back to their houses. They were starving with their small children. And that's supposed to not happen. That was happening because there wasn't any economic security for these workers. So then we had to raise our voice. we definitely had a hope that international organization like ILO, they will be doing something. They did a call, ILO, what do we name that? Call to action, which is again a voluntary scheme, and that they did not give any safeguard to workers at all. So then we had to come together that these are the workers who are working for the manufacturers in their countries, in production countries, and who get profit out of it. It is the brands, retailers, and suppliers, and they do have responsibility to make a economic safeguard for these workers. Then it is 285 workers from our Clean Clothes Campaign network, and there are half of them are trade union who came together, and we jointly wrote this proposal that we need something granted fund aside, keeping aside that protect workers during kind of emergency like COVID. And then we call it pay your workers and respect labor rights, because we have been historically have been seeing that the workers are being face retaliation whenever they try organizing, and it is not like a case study I read somewhere, and I'm saying it is from my own story. I was a factory worker, so I have been faced that, and still I'm documenting these pretty much like every day in my country and other country in my region as well. So then, maybe people can think that why it is now. Definitely, I will ask Yanika to jump in, but it is now because the problem is not over. Since COVID, we have been seeing that the business model is being changing, the commitments is changing, but workers' lives is still there. There is no protection for them. When we are facing this transition, what we wanted to see as a just transition, or we are facing the climate crisis, and there is a huge risk to workers to get a massive job loss, and yet there is no protection. If you ask me what kind of social protection we have in our country to protect workers, none except the EIS, which is Employment Injury Insurance, is a project, 5 years long project. We don't know yet that will be extending or not, and that even we campaigned or raised voice since 2013 to have it after Rana Plaza, and we have it now, but we really don't know where it is heading to. So we still see the vulnerability of our workers in terms of economic security. So we really want the brands to sign on this agreement. And it is not an agreement, just another voluntary piece we can think of. It is a legally binding agreement that we are looking for that brand to sign. And many of them can say that why it has to be, like binding agreement is because we have been experienced that voluntary agreement never helped workers, and binding agreement did. And there is a proven document there which is called accord, international accord, now used to call Bangladesh accord, which is really proved that a binding agreement make a lot difference than a non-binding. I wanted to stop here and giving over to Unique.
Yeah, thanks, Kapona. Yeah, thanks, and pleased to be here with all of you today, here and online. Just as Kapona was saying, we had all these severance cases during COVID. That was not new even then. We've been having 20 of 25 years of cases where, especially in the garment supply chain, suppliers go bankrupt, they disappear overnight, they flee the country, and there is no protection for workers. These cases can drag on for years. There are 2 cases in Thailand at the moment still active that date back to COVID. There is Royal Knit, where in April 2020 they closed because of COVID, and workers are still owed over 1 million in legal severance pay. They were producing for Otto, German company. Body Fashion, also here in Thailand, more than 900 workers are owed 7.6 million US dollar. That's the legal amount under Thai law that they are owed. The Thai law is on their side. The problem is that the corporation has left the country, but often, of course, they reopen under another name. They produce from another country, and the money is still floating around in the supply chain. In the case of Body Fashion, to a Malaysian owner. In the case of Royal Knit, it is at Otto. Now, those claims sound very high, right? They're millions of dollars. And for workers, they do mean a lot of money. It is the real difference between actually having a chance to restart your life. It is your savings. It is money that's yours. But for example, for Otto, a German company who had roughly 15 billion euro in revenue, the sum outstanding is, and I need to look at the zeros here, is 0.0000, 58% of the annual revenue. So coming to our proposal, ja. Even kijken hoor. This clearly is where I am not familiar with this particular. Can you do the slides? I don't know. Do you anyone? Yeah. So as Capona was saying, our plan is to do an agreement, a binding agreement, similar to the agreement that we have for the international accord, where we want to have the agreement do a number of things. A safety net during crisis. So during the economic and ecological crisis that we know is coming. The climate crisis will disrupt a lot of the workers' situation in their supply chains. Companies will close and relocate, leaving workers hanging. The tariff situation will also lead to a lot of disruptions and a lot of closures and reopenings and movings. It will help companies to implement their due diligence obligations, because this is a known risk to workers. Companies are supposed to tackle known risks and provide remedy for them. It also will help them comply with their responsible exit obligations under the OECD guidelines. Governments will help them to fulfill their social protection benefits, given that in most of these countries there's no access. So the agreement also has a freedom of association component to it. Partly it's going to be negotiated directly with trade unions, and it foresees a grievance mechanism. Next slide, please. As you can see here, it really is a bridging solution. So our plan is that we will set up this fund, which you see in the middle, a global severance guarantee fund. So brands will pay into this fund 0.5% of their freight on board value. Brands can bring their employers or their suppliers also into the agreement, and then the employers will pay a percentage of the salary cost. At that point, the brand's FOB price will go down. That money goes into a fund, and then workers who you see on the right can file claims to the fund in cases where the normal system doesn't function. So this is really for bankruptcy, for emergency, for cases where the employer cannot be compelled to pay. This is in line with ILO. The ILO has actually a standard on this. There is an ILO convention and a recommendation on guarantee funds. It's 173. It's not very well known, but it's part of the ILO package on unemployment benefits. So in a nutshell, it means that this is what workers can do. At the same time, part of this money will also be used for social protection schemes in the countries concerned. So the most of the money will go to the workers if they file a claim, but a part will be set aside. And then, say, in Bangladesh, in Thailand, in other countries, there can be a national committee with all the stakeholders in it that can use that funds to improve the protections in the country. Because ultimately, we all are in favor of having this run by the government in a proper national scheme that covers all workers, not just the workers that file a claim here. So the way we wanted to incentivize governments to do that is not only to set aside this money, but also to say that the fees that the brand pay, the FOB premium, will go down as social protection in countries goes up. Right? So say Bangladesh uses some of this money out of the fund, it will set up a guarantee fund and start collecting worldwide from their employers, the minimal sum that is needed to do that. At that point, the brand price that they pay, the premium they pay or the fee they pay is getting lowered. So what we've seen is that why do governments not set up these systems at the moment, right? It's in the interest of the workers, it brings rest, right? You saw during COVID, it's a lot of unrest, it's a lot of disruption. They don't set them up because they also think they will price themselves out of the market. Because then employers will need to factor it into the price, and the employers are saying, well, the brands are already paying too low prices. So this system, which is a little bit complicated because we have complicated problems and therefore also sometimes complicated solutions are necessary, we believe it does incentivize governments to set up these systems. It makes it clear to the brands that consumers and others are willing to pay this, they can price it in. And hopefully this way it will tackle that. I'll skip the next slide because I've already talked through that. If you go to the other one, the next one. So here is some country examples that you can see of related to heat stress, taken partly from the work done by Cornell, and comparing countries to see if they have actually access to government-backed unemployment benefits and what the legal obligation is for severance. Right. So this is also something that the fund will help, draw attention to. Our experience with the Accord also is once brands are compelled to sign up to these things, it becomes a much more known risk and there will be much more interest to tackle it. I think I'm gonna leave it here because this is, can close the slides. Oh yeah, sorry, Johnson is better on top of this than I am. The final thing, it includes a mechanism to also look at non-compliance and worker grievances, of course, in case of failure to pay, right? If the fund doesn't pay out, but also the brands that sign up will also investigate anti-union retaliation. Because the idea overall is that even if you have a government taking responsibility, if there is no freedom of association, if unions are not able to, in the workplace, work with their workers and monitor the situation, no security mechanism will ever work. So brands that pay into the fund, also a very little part of the money will be used for a freedom of association investigation mechanism. Because this is set, as we said, as a binding agreement that's signed by both brands and unions and overseen in the end by brands and unions collectively, including the fund. And a final comment on why should governments support this? It offers a robust instrument also for the Sustainable Development Goal number 1. And as I said, it promotes responsible business conduct, including on the OECD guidelines in terms of responsible exit, which has a specific language there that severance should be paid out, for which right now most brands actually don't really have policies on what happens if the supplier goes bankrupt or otherwise cannot be compelled to pay. Thank you.
Thank you, Iniket and Campona. So now I will invite Jason and David to provide some counter argument. If this is such a good proposal, why we haven't seen it implement yet? So Jason and Jason, would you like to start first?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Campona. Thank you, Inika. The first question goes to the bottom line. Apparel brands, none of us want to pay more than we have to. And the size of the proposed fund, its possible cost, it looks pretty big. So the question is, why would brands commit to bear this cost? Why submit to a comprehensive approach when the firefighting, even the large scale firefighting in the COVID crisis, seems to be working? That is, it looks cheaper. It looks cheaper to fight these fires one by one than to invest in a comprehensive approach. So why would they do it?
Okay, first of all, I think it is a time for empty promises is over, right? So for years, just telling in the glossy report that we do this and that, I think we should come out of that. So brands really need to take the responsibility. And the second one, they enjoy the bigger piece of pie. Why not to take the responsibility? The workers are starving down to the chain, and top of that, they don't have the social protection. So this is the time for a step up.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, of course. I think what Jason also was asking, like, if the brand can, just pay case by case, because that's the interesting thing. We've seen that during COVID, we've managed with Pay Your Workers campaign to get around $50 million out of brands, right? So, and that was just campaigning on cases. So 7 million was paid for Brilliant Alliance. I'm pretty sure we'll manage to get the Royal Knit at one point paid. But Jason is correct that at the moment, brands think it is a cheaper option for them to just wait until there is a big enough campaign or a problem, and then to pay something, than to get ahead of this. I think what we can do and what we try to do is to continue to put this pressure on brands so they get really tired of firefighting. But I think what we also need to do, and that's why brands will sign, if governments, investors, and legislation starts getting serious about this, and intergovernmental organizations too, then I think we will get to a situation where they will do it. The other thing that I think is staring brands in the eyes is that this disruption of a supply chain also will hurt them. If there is no predictability, if workers are forced to move, if companies who close down have disruptive supply chains, that will also hurt in the long term the business model. But that's again a long-term argument which they might not be compelled to take unless there is regulation or legislation. There was a very interesting case in the Netherlands in the court against G-Star, because G-Star had a Vietnamese supplier and that they closed overnight, and the Vietnamese supplier filed a case against G-Star because the Vietnamese supplier said, we have to pay this severance, which we cannot pay because you did not pay us the order as you left us. And they won that. Right? So I do believe there is, separate from the due diligence legislation, there is also a case to be made from the supplier side, where having some sort of solution which requires both brands and suppliers to both front end this money and to make sure that there can be a good regulation in the supply chain is in their interest.
I'm gonna follow up briefly. I hadn't run the numbers, but you repeated them, and I ran them. If the $50 million figure is right, and the WRC's $4 billion figure is right, that's 5 cents on the dollar for the brands. That's a huge discount. If the $50 million number is wrong, let's say it's 250. There are workers fired who received payment, and it's not in our count. So let's say it's 250 million, and the WRC figure is off by well, let's say the WRC figure is more accurately 1 billion. I'm just making this up. Then that's 25 cents on the dollar, a huge discount. So that's not the question. That sort of brings me to the power problem. How do you obligate or how do you lever brands into a scheme that they would be reluctant to join? And you hinted at it in your answer, I think, that other pressures, larger pressures, governmental pressures, may force them to do it. But I'm not sure I understand what those are.
I think that in general, it will require multiple pressure points, as you said, because I mean, we've seen that also with the international accord, right? That required a crisis, in that case, Rana Plaza collapsing, plus multiple pressure points because everybody wanted a solution, plus a proposal. There was a proposal on the table, a binding agreement, right? That compelled one or two brands, and then those one or two brands didn't want to be the only brands. They started to pushing the sector in, and then it happened. That in turn created better regulation. So I think what we're looking for this problem of severance theft is also that combination, right? A combination of crisis, which we know is happening, even though this is much more a slow motion crisis than a building collapse. It is a real crisis that is going to hurt everybody, and multiple pressure points. The business case for brands to not do this will always be bigger than the productivity or other advantages they might have. But for governments, for international organizations, for investors, for everybody who's interested in really building sustainable supply chains, this is a really good proposal because it will mean that the relocations can be managed. It will mean that workers will actually have a chance to move forward with their lives, and it will contribute to the development goals. I think from our end, we can do the campaigning and the pressure, and we're looking for the UN responsible business and human rights environment to help put these other pressure points in place or come up with alternative solutions. This is what I like about the stress test. Everybody sees this problem. I'm sure our proposal can be improved upon, and hopefully we can hear some of that as well.
Yeah. Time check. We have 30 minutes to the end of the session. So, David, I think you are very eager to counter the argument already.
Yeah, well, you made kind of a point that it's manageable in terms of money, and brands can afford it, and it's at the end not so much. And 0.5%, well, doesn't sound so much. And if you break it down, imagine a sourcing share in Bangladesh of a bigger brand. It's about 1 billion FOB that Inditex bestsellers and others are buying in Bangladesh. And 0.5% would then be 5 million a year. It's probably not so much. But the question is, such a fund will only work if it's enough. And so the question is the fund really ready to be available in a storm? Because if factory closures, if mass dismissal happen, in a slower pace, it will be enough if you combine payments of different brands and so on. But imagine a disruption like a pandemic. Imagine a disruption caused by a natural disaster. Imagine an earthquake hitting the base in Istanbul of the production and the many workers and factories that might be affected by this. Imagine technology advances. We might come to a moment where we have automatization, robotization within 1-2 years replacing whole forms of doing the business. Will the fund be ready to survive in such a crisis? Or do you foresee any backup mechanisms that then comes in so that we can be sure that workers will get their severance and wages? Or is there a risk that the fund at the end says, no, we run out of money?
Yeah, thank you for raising this. I think we went through all these pros and cons when we started the discussion. There will be always risk, but I want you guys to go back during Rana Plaza. So it was a multiple crisis came together. It wasn't only a building collapse or over 1,000 lives gone away. It was a financial insecurity there as well because the country, legislation doesn't support the compensation that workers needed during that time. And ILO Convention 121 wasn't ratified by us, our country. So we were in a situation that we needed to handle the emotions of losing that many workers. We needed to have a better policy to protect workers in coming days. And we really needed a money to be there to protect those workers are injured and also those families whose loved one has been gone along with their primary as well as their primary earner. So we had to do multiple things. When we were asking the brands to sign on their code, simultaneously we were running the campaign that we really needed fund to protect this family. And then Rana Plaza and Tajreen Arrangement Fund came. We see the shortfalls, but we start. Okay, that really led us to have this EIS, and lately, to give a avenue us to campaign in the country to make our policy better. So I would say that, yeah, it's a huge question that if we have these big crises, will the fund enough? Maybe not if it is pandemic. or maybe not. If we have like earthquake, like we have had in Istanbul or maybe Nepal, like a couple of years ago, though we didn't lose that many workers. But at least we can say we have a fund aside and we set a mechanism. And whether that fund is manageable or not, yes, it is manageable. Like when we are having like 220 brands sign on the accord, no one thought that it would be even possible to get like more than 3 brands. Okay, we got 220 brands and they paid the fee, and there was a institution who was handle all those. So we can look for similar model to do that. And in the same time, in the countries, we are not sitting down. We are within the trade union, civil society, and with government. We are also working on to our policies to be modified, or ILO convention that is, really uphold worker lives and pays, those need to be ratified. So we are working there. So if social protection level up, then we don't need to worry about that how much money we have aside. But I think shortfall is there, but we needed to have the fund. And Yeneka, over to you.
Yeah, maybe just 2 small things to add. Number one, when a crisis like a big one like you mentioned comes, governments and international organizations will want to have a response. What we saw during COVID, for example, the EU set aside 110 million euro to give to Bangladesh, specifically for wage and severance issues in the garment industry. They only managed to disburse a couple of million out of that. So you need to build up institutions, even if they are not from day one fully functional, in order to at least start the practice run of making sure you can receive money, you can implement it, and you know how to disperse it in a good way to the workers. And there is this grievance mechanism if things goes wrong, so there's a check and balance in the system. Now we've built up, as between us, WRC and others, as social movements, a lot of expertise on disbursing compensation, which should not be our expertise, but we know for severance and for the fire and building compensations a lot about it. So that knowledge, instead of doing it case by case, that's maybe another answer to the first question too. Why would brands do that? Or what is the arguments in favor? Instead of trying to, for each case, again, also build up disbursement systems and knowledge on how to do that, you would put that into here. And we would be interested to work with IFC, international finance organizations, just about anybody who could think through how you would manage such a fund without having to pool a lot of money in one place. That then would need to be available, but what you can do in terms of social insurance mechanisms tied to that. That's what the ILO knows how to do, right? Yeah.
So this means that you described that a small portion of the fund should go into building up social security systems in countries. And this means, to the other extent, such a fund needs to build contacts and establish some form of cooperation with with global institutions in order to have this readiness for a black swan event.
Yeah.
So the role of government is important for such a fund.
Yeah, we've developed, there's a few copies there, a government guidance document, precisely because we think this requires both for expertise and for making brands understand that this is a good thing to do. We require that support. And also in Europe, it was the guarantee funds that actually were used in order to then disburse and make sure that people had income during COVID. If those institutions weren't there, like in Germany, it's the employers that pay into the guarantee fund. In the Netherlands, my own country, it's partly the employers, partly the government that run the social security mechanism. The disbursement of income to people during the COVID crisis was run through these mechanisms. But if you don't have them, like in Bangladesh or in other countries, and you also have nothing else, then you can have all the money in the world, but you're still not able to get it to the people in time of crisis, as you described.
Are you resting your case? That's it? Okay. Okay. So one of the things that you talked about in laying out the proposal was the role of the would-be role of governments, and we're here in the home of long-term thinking. governments are governments are obligated to design and build severance schemes and social protection systems. So this proposal seems to undermine that obligation. Well, in two ways. One, it's a sector specific proposal. So we would, if this were adopted, you would be doing something for apparel workers that transport workers or miners wouldn't benefit from. And the fund would be taking on what's essentially a public obligation. So what's the answer to that?
Look, yes, they should, and they are not doing it. That's the very short answer, is that our vision is to build systems that in the long term will achieve that goal. That is and remains the overall goal. Government should be taking this responsibility. But if you look at the situation of the garment supply chain, you have sometimes willing governments in garment production countries where now these systems are not there and where the events like COVID hit the hardest. Why are they not doing that, even if they're theoretically willing? Every time we discuss it, they say, well, if we start doing that, we price ourselves out of the market. Cost of production goes up. If we start saying to our employers, you have to pay all that money into this fund, they say, what do the employers say? The employers say, we can do it because the brand's prices are too low. So the idea here is to build this up in a way that incentivizes governments to do that. By taking the money out of the brand premium, you make the brand's price for it, pay for it in the beginning. That means that actually the production country government no longer can make that argument. And in fact, the moment they start increasing their social protection, right, they build it up, the brand fee goes lower, so they become more attractive. So instead of a race to the bottom, you actually counter that by building up a price incentive to make this a race to the top. Again, if governments would do this, I'd be delighted. I'd go on holiday or on retire. That would be even better, because this is a very long-standing problem, and we've been working on this for decades. And what we see happening now is all the signs are there. Everybody who really delves into the numbers of heat stress, of tariffs, of all the changes, know that we are looking at a really massive reorganization of this supply chain, which will leave tens and tens and tens of millions of women workers into a situation where their savings, their legally owed premiums are there, and nobody's paying. Like I said, the two Thai cases, why is the Thai government not compelling? They can't.
Time check. We have 8 more minutes before Q&A.
I just wanted to add with, Inika, one, like, your question is very valid, but in this, if we put in a different way, that in my country, the workers' minimum wage is like $100 little more dollars, okay? And every time union or workers raise their voice, they say, we need a food subsidy, and they're asking to the government, why? If you are working for some XYZ factory or XYZ brand, then their responsibility to give you a money that you can buy minimum, but the wages they're getting, it is bare minimum. That is why they're asking for a food subsidy from the government. Like the Walmart associate, they in the US, they're living in a food stamp, right? That's a problematic world. Okay, so in here we are just giving some breathing place to the government, that here is the money, so you have a space to work on your own social protection in your country. Like, as I said, and I'm repeating again, that within the country, like, if I go 1 year back, we might not have that position, even talking and placing this discussion that our workers needed to have a social protection. But since the political paradigm shift, now we are being talking about so many changing the law, as well as to ratifying the ILO convention, all these. So in the ground, we can work with our government on that social protection need to be there. But at the same time, if brands sign on these documents, so that will be complement them and given a avenue to work on these protections.
Well, so if this is in principle something that governments should do, but we know they don't. And so now we need to have a business community coming in with responsibility and kind of fill the gap. We have been in this situation sometimes. I'm not from a business, but I observe how businesses act in such situation. And I broadly see three groups of how brands act in such a situation. And there are some who I would call leaders, really see the problem and genuinely want to work on it and might engage. And I think you're now seeking exactly these kind of brands who would like to lead the pack. Then you have a second group that is looking out what are others doing. And once a thing is being developed, they will join because they just observe and stay a bit behind. But then there is another group, and it's not too small. And this group is looking out, can I get something for free? So the question of free riders who can see, well, if other companies already establish a system and I can get the benefits of this system without paying, why should I? And as we know this group is there, we also know that also the leaders are aware of this, and they might wonder, why the hell should we pay the bill of those who want a free ride? So the question is, what is a way of reducing this group of free riders? Is there a mechanism? How do you envision this to happen in practice so that you have a response for those who are saying, well, if we act, yes, but we don't want to pay the bill of the others?
Sorry, yeah, I can share my experience from the Accord that we had a free rider when we have these brands sign Accord. We had a free rider there as well, but it was also their. I think I should not say responsibility, but they were wise enough to work with other brands to get on the board. Like when we had Accord, we had an alliance as well. So the Accord work standards was there that if they would be inspecting any factory, the alliance brands do not need to inspect that factory. So they complementary took this, opportunity. So the free riders was there, but we have seen that these brands who already signed their code, they also started talking to those brands who didn't sign their code and take some responsibilities. So that is my experience that I'm sharing, but I want Yanika that what we thought in the proposal to share that.
Look, again, ultimately you want regulation on this, right? The question is, how do you move to regulation? I mean, law follows practice, right? So if we need to establish a practice in order for the law to follow it, until that time, yes, there will be a free rider problem. To me, it's a sector problem that I feel legitimate to also put back on the sector. What are you